3rd. Mr. Dominic DeMar has agreed to help me, and he will start the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. All board members are present and executive. I want to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting and remind the audience of the request to address board cards that must be completed and submitted to the board secretary if they wish to speak to an agenda item. Board policy provides for 2 cards. White cards to be submitted in order to speak to an agenda item, and the blue cards to be submitted in order to speak during public comments. Policy also states there is a 5-minute maximum time limit per speaker. Due to the open meeting law, board members are not allowed to address items that are not on the agenda. If you do not want to address the board but wish to give your comments in writing, you can do so on a goldenrod sheet, and all members shall receive a copy. Okay, can I have a motion for the agenda?
I move the governing board approve the agenda as presented.
A second.
I have a motion, it's been second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Public comments.
No public one. Oh, those for that's for, yeah, those are not public.
I have agenda items. Superintendent and board reports. Dr. Lewis.
Good evening, everyone. It's so great to see a full house here tonight of smiling faces and people very proud of their schools. It's great. We are happy to tell you our 100th day enrollment is exactly as our demographers and our budget advisory committee anticipated, so we are right on as far as we're concerned with the current year funding, and that was a big scare for us as we were anticipating shifts. So I'm really proud of the budget advisory team, really proud of our demographers and what they did for us. Thank you for that. I also want to thank this board for being encouragers of risk-taking, and I really enjoyed our conversation in a variety of ways about how do we honor and promote adventurous thinkers and collaborative learners while we study ourselves in every aspect of who we are and how we can keep becoming better. What a wonderful, healthy culture we have. The next piece that I have is we have Apple Distinguished School Award. So can we ask the Apple Distinguished people to come up? Where are you? All right, W, people, there you are, El Gente. That was my dual language. Thank you. Authentic.
Dr. Lewis, Madam President. Podemos hacer, podemos seguir. Dr. Lewis, Madam President, and members of the board. Good evening. My name is Brian Peterson, and I'm a development executive with Apple. Apple has recognized over 400 schools in 29 countries for continuous innovation in learning, teaching, and the school environment. Today, I am happy, honored to recognize Biltmore Prep and Monte Vista as members of that global community. At Apple, we believe Apple Distinguished Schools are some of the most innovative schools in the world. They're centers of leadership and educational excellence that demonstrate our vision of exemplary learning environments. They use Apple products to inspire student creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. The most innovative schools in the world raise the bar for what they expect of technology, and we see them doing amazing things. Leadership in Apple Distinguished Schools cultivate environments in which students are excited about learning, curiosity is fostered, and learning is a personal experience for every student. They showcase innovative uses of technology in learning, teaching, and the school environment, and have documented results of academic accomplishment. All of the most innovative schools center their stories with students. They all celebrate, support, and inspire their students to be creators. Leaders in these innovative schools think of their teachers as designers of the learning experience. They design the learning experience so their learners can be creators. These schools also pay a lot of attention to the environment they create, the physical spaces, the infrastructure, and the experiences technologies provide. Not just to support learning and teaching, but to inspire. To inspire everyone, most importantly, the students to do more. Apple Distinguished Schools are recognized for 2 years and have the opportunity to renew their recognition by demonstrating continuous innovation. During the 2-year designation, Apple Distinguished Schools openly share their successes with other educators by hosting school visits and by publishing their stories in the form of a book on our iBooks store. Their schools and student stories are showcases of best practices. On a personal note, the team and I had the opportunity to visit these 2 schools today, and we are inspired by the work that the students are doing, by the strength and the courage that the teachers exemplify in changing instructional practice. It was an absolute honor visiting those 2 schools. So, on behalf of Tim Cook and the entire Apple family, I am honored to present the Biltmore Prep and Monte Vista communities with the Apple Distinguished School Recognition for 2017 and 2019.
Is Emily in the house? There she is. So Stephanie and Joel coming up, and then let's have all the Biltmore staff here join us for a photo as well. We'll just go right up here.
And Monte Vista stuff.
Yeah, they want Monte Vista stuff. Get up there. She's going to have to be told twice to get up there.
Thank you.
I want my own. Okay, anybody else for the Biltmore group? Okay, let's do one. Oh, wait, one more. One for Dean. Goofy face. All right.
Which way?
Right tilt right.
Yeah.
Okay.
your first board meeting and you're doing this already. There you go. Yeah, likes. I know, like a million likes.
And now we'll have governing board reports. Carl?
So it's interesting to be on the board and make decisions for a district, and then definitely we hear about the schools and the things we're doing there. So it's just also exciting to, as a parent, see one of my daughter's teachers in the audience, and that's what keeps us coming back. So I just wanted to acknowledge the best of the best is in the audience tonight.
Oh, yes, I do. I missed it last week, or last meeting, so I'll do it today. So the annual school board convention was at the Biltmore this year, and one workshop, I attended several workshops, but one I'd like to bring to the public's attention, and I'm so thrilled that so many of you are here to hear this, because it might be something you like too, but it was something I really thought was pretty awesome. So the workshop I attended was about shared use. What shared use means is when a school is open to not only its students during the day, but also to the community at other times of day. So not only the students, but also the community around it. There are currently 6 school districts in Maricopa County that participate in shared use. The school districts are both in rural and urban settings. Some of the shared use in these districts are outdoor areas that are shared use. You know how sometimes you see closed campuses and you see a nice running field, but you can't get in and that kind of stuff, or a playground for the kids. So shared outdoor use, but then others are open the interior of the school to the community for community ed classes, libraries, PE, and much more, yoga and things like that. So just a little factoid to go along with this. Phoenix has ranked 96th out of 100 cities for parks per 10,000 residents. That means another bad rating. Just like our education, Arizona is at the bottom of the list. So that's why it's really important to look at things like shared use. The benefits include health, increased physical activity, better access to healthy food, reduced stress, and improved mental well-being for students, parents, and the community. Another benefit is equity, reduced health inequities by creating more spaces to play and gather in neighborhoods that need them the most. Community, stronger community ties and decreased crime, vandalism, and violence in spaces that residents value and use regularly. Education, improved academic performance and better classroom behavior among kids who are more physically active. And economy, more cost-effective than building new facilities, increased economic opportunities, higher property values in neighborhoods where shared use is happening. Lastly, I just want to let you know that this workshop showed me that it is financially possible to do this. And the Maricopa County Public Health actually has workshops on how to do this, and these workshops are available to anyone, I think. So that is one thing I wanted to present that I found very exciting. Thank you.
I have nothing to report.
On tonight's agenda, one of the items is the dual language immersion, and so I didn't know that much about it, so I made an appointment to go visit it this past week. And it was very nice. I went from kindergarten to 7th grade. I saw Spanish classes taught in Spanish and English in each grade, and I talked to the consumer students. in these classes. I talked to at least 3 children in each class. And I asked them, hopefully age-appropriate questions. One of my questions to all of them was, do you like the dual immersion courses? And I did not get a negative from any of the students. I asked them what they liked about it and what they didn't like. And one young lady in, I believe it was first grade, she couldn't tell me exactly what she liked, but she said she didn't like shrimp. So I had to reword my questions. It was a great experience. I spent about an hour and a half at the school. And what I want to say, the most I came back with is in each classroom, the children were very, very excited about learning. You could see it happening. And it was really nice to see the students pay total attention to the teacher. I'd pull them out and talk to them, and I didn't pick the ones from the front, the ones that raise their hand and know all the answers. I kind of went in the back to the ones I figured were maybe a little disenfranchised. But everything was positive, and I want to thank Dr. DeMar, and I want to thank the teachers and all the students I talked to. Thank you. Okay, we're on approval of consent.
I'd like to remove something just for discussion. So I move that the governing board approve consent agenda items A through F and letter H.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. So you want to talk about G?
Yeah, I would just like to hear what we're doing differently about this. Dr. Lewis and I talked about this a little bit, but I don't really actually know that much about what the Director of Community Education does or what, that department does. So I'd just like to hear what we're doing differently.
Thank you, Member McSheffrey. So the team looked as the opening is getting ready to occur and wondered how might we modernize the job description. And the job description now intensifies the community outreach components, and it looks to ways to be perhaps a cost-neutral role as we lose federal funding. We're not going to be able to sustain probably the entire department on title dollars, and we're going to need to look at more creative cost or revenue generating mechanisms. So those were the elements that were added. I asked Dr. Lugo or Dr. Peterson to chime in relative to other descriptors they think would be important to add.
So some of the specifics, changes in the job descriptions include creating a self-sustaining or for-profit business model to extend learning opportunities to students and their families. Therefore, we're looking to, and this is updates, changes, designs, implements, and monitors for-profit or self-sustaining business model to extend learning opportunities. I just talked about that. Develops and cultivates and sustains business partnerships, directs communication with any outside partners involved in the department and initiatives. These are the new bullets that I've highlighted. Number 11, oversees Family Resource Center and volunteer programs, and supports with the oversight and implementation of preschool and kinder readiness programs. They're already doing some of that, but really intensifying, making sure it's spelled out in the job description.
Great. I mean, I think these are all really great additions, and I think there is a lot of opportunity for it being a revenue generating area. So I appreciate these updates. And I also mentioned to Dr. Lewis, I think we have room for improvement in volunteer programs, and that can be something that is more than pays for itself. I've seen in some presentations. So I appreciate that that's in there, and hope to see some more volunteer opportunities as well as revenue. So thank you.
the governing board approve a consent agenda item G, which is the updated job description for Director of Community Ed.
A second?
It's been moved in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. And we're on to educational services.
All right, Dr. Pearson, would you like to introduce our Gateway School presentation?
You certainly would. It's our pleasure tonight to have our team from Gateway come before the governing board and executive team and audience to share their experiences as our principal of the year. Mr. Andy Gutierrez has become the principal at Gateway, and what he has observed and some of the changes that they've been putting into place. So I would like to welcome Mr. Gutierrez to the podium.
All right. Good evening, Madam President, members of the governing board, as well as executive cabinet. Just want to share with you some of the observations that not only myself that have made, but also in talking with certified, classified staff, talking with parents, talking with students, and just kind of looking at what we can do to strengthen some of the systems within the school, as well as obviously support student learning, and then begin reestablishing some of the culture and the climate over at Gateway School. Before each of the slides, I'm going to tell you just a brief little story that kind of lend itself to why we've made some of the changes at Gateway School, and I have some staff that are going to be joining me and sharing those, and we have some neat videos as well. One of the big pieces of information is, unfortunately, we were identified as a comprehensive support and improvement school. Basically means that we are an in-school improvement. We were identified as the bottom 5% in the entire school. Obviously, this is very detrimental coming into something, and one of the first things that I told the staff when I first met with them is I said, you know, as I was walking around the school, I said, you are not a D school. I see some great things happening in here. We just need to make some little tweaks, little adjustments, and do what we can to get ourselves out of this, because as together as a team, we can definitely do that. With this school improvement, we have a strong partnership with the Arizona Department of Education. It is a 3-year minimum process. We cannot get out any earlier than 3 years. We're going to do everything we can to get out of this in 3 years. A few of the things that we need to accomplish this is we need to continuously show growth in all of our AZ merit data. We also need to always be out of the bottom 5%. We cannot be in the 5%. To help with this, we are allowed to apply for some grants. So we are applying for an initial planning grant right now. And then we should be finding that information out here probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Once we get that money, which we will, then we get to apply for an implementation grant as well. So we're shooting for the stars and applying for about $65,000 for each of those grants to help us and our team continue to move forward, learn some new strategies that we can share with our teachers as well as our students and improve student learning. The district office has been very supportive with this as well. They are on and helping us throughout the entire day and giving us ideas, strategies, feedback so we can help our school get out of this school improvement.
Is it okay if we ask questions in the middle?
Whatever you'd like, the choice is yours.
Mr. Gutierrez, a couple questions on this school improvement. I think it's fairly clear, like to be out of the bottom 5%, but when the state is looking for continuous improvement, like to what degree, what does that look like? What are the benchmarks for that?
So what we've done is we've looked at our benchmark data, and what we're kind of trying to look at is raising it about 6 to 8% based off of the subject areas, and so we want our students to improve by 6 to 8% at the various grade levels in both ELA and math.
Okay, and then for the different grants that you're applying for, are these for, can you tell us a little more about the substances? Is that for like a educational consultant or?
It can be used for multiple things. So the big areas that we're applying for, one of the biggest pieces, and you'll hear a little bit more about it, is our work with PLCs. So what we want to do is send our leadership team as well as some teachers to a PLC Institute, and luckily it's here locally. And so we want to really fully understand that research-based system, because the little bit of work that we've been already doing with PLCs has made some huge improvements with our teachers. They feel more comfortable, more confident with the standards, and we're seeing that true collaboration. So we're looking at that. We're going to be looking at sending Joanne, to our assistant principal, to a PBIS conference. It's a well-respected one that all of our assistant principals went to. I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, and they came back with a wealth of knowledge to help share with our schools. So one of the next areas that we thought is super important, and this is not just at Gateway, it's at all the schools, it's very important that we talk with our students about the purpose and the why of our assessments. We're not just giving them assessments just to give them assessments. We are giving them for a purpose. It's to help them. It's to help our teachers look at some of the areas that they need to improve on, and some of the areas where they are excelling at, and share that, the acknowledgement of the areas that they have done well. And so one of the pieces we're looking at is setting goals with students. One of the next pieces that we're going to add to this is actually doing it with parents as well. We're going to be having a family learning night here in a couple weeks, where the students, the teachers, and the parents are going to sit down and look at their benchmark assessment data and set goals for what they want to do. So to share a little bit about this, I'm going to have Miss Amanda Torrey come up and share, and she has a video that she'd like to share with you as well.
Good evening, everybody. I am Mrs. Torrey. I teach 4th grade ELD at Gateway with these lovely people over here. We educators know that assessment is an extremely important part of instruction, as it determines whether or not the goals of education are being met. It helps answer the questions such as, are the students learning what they're supposed to be learning? Is there something that I, as a teacher, can change to help better their understanding? Teachers set goals to take charge of student learning, but we want students to take charge of their own learning. We want them to believe in their academic abilities and not get discouraged. We want them to understand that it's okay that they did not score 100% the first time, and the important part is that they're growing throughout the year. The goal setting process in my class begins with students analyzing and having discussions about our entire class data compared to the other 4th grade classes in the district. Together we create a class goal before meeting individually. When I pull them to meet, the students then analyze their individual data and their current test-taking performance, comparing it to where they started and deciding where they would like to end or what they would like to achieve. After choosing what they would like to achieve, they determine what it is they need to concentrate on and improve in order to get there. The students' goals are small, positive, clearly defined, and measurable. And the classroom, an individual goal setting gives students long-term vision and short-term motivation. The students start to take pride in their learning and can see clear forward progress in what might have seemed a long drawn-out process. By setting goals, students can improve their academic performance, increase their motivation to achieve, increase pride and satisfaction in their performance, and improve their self-confidence. And also, this is something that doesn't just happen once, it's an ongoing process. So we'll be continuing it. And this is just a little video of me meeting with a student in my class. Figure out where we want to be. Where are we going to be here? Where do you want to be? What do you think is a good increase? 78. You think about 78 here? All right. So you only want to increase, what did you start at?
I started at 65 and then I went to 67.
So you want your goal to be 78. Okay. So you're going to go up about 10%. So I'm going to go ahead and make your line right here so that you know where you need to be when we graph benchmark 2. All right. So in order to get to this part, we're going to go ahead and write in a goal. Okay. So think about what is going to help you to get here. You've already been doing something right because you're already increasing here. What else could we do?
Read the questions first and then read the story and then read the questions again. and then choose your answer.
Okay, so you think the strategy that you're going to use is read the questions first, and then go back and read the story? All right, go ahead and write that in as our goal. Do you have a pencil?
Alright, so the next area that we're going to talk a little bit about was looking at our PLCs, and again, this kind of leads to the conversation that Mr. Zaragoza had mentioned, is what can we do a little bit differently with our PLCs to support our teachers. And so, talked with my coaches, talked with our teachers, and we decided, you know what, we need to have 2 meetings a week. Obviously, being in school improvement, we need to give our teachers more support. And one of the big little mini mottos that I've been really trying to use is let's find a way to work smarter, not harder. And so I said, you know what, let's do this. We're gonna have 2 meetings a week, but you are going to walk away with something from that meeting that you would normally be working on in the evening time or on the weekends. That's my promise to you if you're having another meeting. And so we looked at Rick Dufour's PLC model, and to talk a little bit more about that, I have Ms. Lozano and Ms. Narvaez, our instructional coaches.
Good evening. So professional learning communities, or PLCs, like Mr. Gutierrez said, are based on Dufour's 4 essential questions, and the PLC structure is really meant to help our teachers prepare to deliver instruction to their students in a sustainable way. So it's more than just preparing them for the next assessment, it's making sure that they have a deep understanding of the content that we are to deliver to our students, so that knowledge stays with them from grade to grade. We have a 4-meeting cycle that takes us through Dufour's 4 questions. So at our first meeting, we really talk about what our students are supposed to be learning. And that's where we really deconstruct our state standards. And really right now we're at the point where we're diving deep into one standard at a time. And we choose those standards based on our most recent test scores. So right now we're finishing up with analyzing data from Benchmark 1. And pretty soon here we're moving into analyzing focus standards from Benchmark 2. In the next meeting, we look at building short, targeted, aligned assessments so that we can identify whether or not our students understood and learned the content that we prepared for them. At our 3rd meeting, we bring back the data and the student samples to really say who got it and who didn't. And then we finish up our PLC process by really looking at what we're going to do to support the students who did understand the content that was delivered to them and who did master it. And then what can we do with the students who didn't get it or didn't get all of it. And the process is really meant to ensure that we, like I said in the beginning, that we have a sustainable system so that that knowledge sticks with our students. This year, it's been one of learning. It's been one of progress and also one of great growth and collaboration with our teachers. And so Ms. Narvaez, who is our math coach, I work with ELA on Gateway's campus. She's going to talk to you more about the kind of growth that we've seen through our math PLCs this year.
I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide, which is similar to ELA. I just kind of want to speak to the math data. You can see from the slide before, I'll kind of go back. ELA is making a lot of growth in specific grade levels from year to year, and you see pockets of growth in math as well. And one of the things that we've noticed with launching the PLCs in math is the curriculum essentials lack like a deconstruction guide, and I was just kind of perusing on the website and found deconstruction guides tied to the Common Core state standards, and so we've really been using that as another resource to help us make sense of the standards and the concepts through Engage New York. I want to show you this video. This is an authentic PLC meeting with the 1st grade team, and I'll just go ahead and play it so you guys can see what their discussion is all about.
So basically, students need to be able to subtract multiples of 10 from two-digit numbers using a juggling strategy.
Okay, so task analysis is next. Okay, so teacher sequences of student learning steps. What are the steps to learning the second? That would be so making temps first. So is that a review of making temps? We've been making temps.
It's a review, but we're actually
It's kind of making temps out of the journal first.
like the first 4 lessons are all about making those tens.
Making temps.
Making tens.
Okay, got it. Well, I think we can't have done it before, we're speaking like one tent and some change. How many?
Multiple.
Tents. Okay, so what's after making tents?
Being able to count tens and ones. So having 2 PLC meetings rather than just one, some of the more positive things we've seen from there is just being accountable for what we're doing. We really have an understanding of what we're teaching. We're able to go in there and debrief. And if we met in the beginning of the week, we talk about what we're going to teach. We plan about how we're going to plan our lesson. We come in the next time during that same week and we're able to debrief and talk about what worked, what didn't work, or what needs to be changed. So that's beneficial because we're not just meeting once. And that also helps to plan for the following week and having to do our lesson.
And I just want to make this final note that this PLC that you just saw a couple of months ago, these teachers were not facilitating that meeting on their own. It was very much led by the coaches. And now we're at a place where teachers are really emerging as leaders to have discussions, deconstruct standards, make sense of standards so they can pace their calendars and their guides to really know what they're teaching.
Alright, so next, you've heard multiple times, one of the areas that we've been really looking at is some interventions that we can put in place regarding the culture. Don't definitely want to sugarcoat things. This has been an area of challenge for Gateway School, is the student safety, discipline, and especially amongst the middle school. A few of the behaviors that we have seen is a high degree of student disruptions in the classrooms, disrespectful behaviors, students leaving or not even attending class, walking around campus, and vandalizing the school. We recognized there was a need to put some new systems in place to help make our school a safer place and help make the students feel comfortable and safe in a learning environment. To begin with this, we adjusted some specials times, so that way there's not as many students in one area at a time. We adjusted some lunch and class schedules as well, again, so that way we wouldn't have as many students, we would have more visibility on the students, more staff available, and then obviously designing some clear expectations and procedures of what we want the students to follow. To share a little bit more about some of the interventions and systems that we put in place, I have Joanne Roach, our assistant principal, coming out.
Good evening. What I'd like to share, I'm very proud to be at Gateway. It's such a special place to be in a special time. And we are making some really great strides with our kids and our teachers and staff. One of the major things that we're working on is working together with MCISA and also with the ACEs. And so we're collaborating at least quarterly. Yes, ma'am.
When you say ACEs, do you mean the adverse childhood experiences, or do you mean the alternative school?
The first one you have.
Okay.
Yes, the adverse childhood experiences, yes ma'am. That needs to be clarified. Yes, we are working with MCISA so that our teachers and staff are more aware about the ACEs and how that can impact our students, their behavior, their academics, and all around. Because we have to take care of that social emotional learning before we can get to the academic piece. And so our MCISA coordinator, her name is Carolyn, and she's been coordinating with us some PLCs at least quarterly with our staff, in addition to working with individual teachers on the specific needs that they have, which is really great, and then also different team collaborations. It just depends on the needs of the staff, and so we included a staff survey to determine their needs. and then kind of going from there. Another thing that we're working on is, more specifically, one of our teachers, Ms. Power, she's 7th grade, language arts, and she's also dedicated 45 minutes of her time in class once a week to also work on some curriculum with Spark, which is also some more social emotional learning and working with kids and determining their needs in that aspect. Another thing that they're working on is modeling different behaviors or even just working with students and how can those classroom management strategies be improved. And so again, it's just reaching out to the teachers and different staff members as well and giving them the background that they need so that they can be more successful with their students. Like Mr. Gutierrez said, we talked about restructuring the middle school schedules, decreasing the office. We have seen a huge decrease of students visiting the office, and that speaks to a lot of these changes that we're making. It's actually almost odd when you're seeing kids in the office now. It's too quiet, you almost have to knock on wood. So which is a really great sign that we're seeing. We still have moments here and there, we have issues here and there, but we're still seeing great improvements. We're including innovative technology learning with the iPads that were integrated with the Apple program, and collaborative decision making. Even on small to big decisions, we are really immersing ourselves, our teachers, staff, students on more of those decision making. That way there's more buy-in, and that way they don't feel like things are happening to them, they're happening with them, okay? And that kind of leads me into the restorative practices that we are also beginning to explore along with the district, with the committee that we're attending. I was the first committee member from Gateway to attend this, but I'm also trying to get more staff involved in the restorative practices committee so that we can not only utilize the PPIS that we're also implementing, but just make it part of what we do at Gateway, not just another separate thing. So we're trying to find ways to make those two pieces fit.
Ms. Roach, I was excited to hear you say that you're proud to be part of the staff. It's been a long time since I was a teacher, but I taught in a very challenging, low-performing school. And I think one of the challenges we had was it was already hard on us, and our students didn't feel that pride, or they didn't feel that many of the staff were proud to be there too. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, did the students at Gateway know that you're proud to be there? And how do you know, and how do you build that?
The key thing is building the relationships, and coming in as new staff, as all of us, mostly our leadership, we have to build from the ground up those relationships. And so there's a lot of mistrust that sometimes kids have, and so you have to take the good with the bad, and not get overwhelmed with some of the behaviors, and just remember that there's good people and they want to be good, and remember that they still have something positive to give to the world. And I think when you're consistent with that belief and you prove it in different ways, that I think those walls come down. And it doesn't happen overnight, but slowly but surely we are seeing that, believe it or not. And so that's why, even just from the beginning, even kids would ask me, are you still going to be here next year? And yes, I'm going to be here. I'm going to see you, in high school and things like that. And so they always have that temporary worry that you're going to leave them. And so, it's just, that's where they're at. And so they just want to know that there's someone there behind them and cheering them on.
And unfortunately, our parents and our students couldn't be here, but we've made a quick little video that we'd like to share with you, and it has some of them are in Spanish, but we have the translation at the bottom for you to see.
Lo que me gusta de Gateway son Pi y los profesores, porque la mayoría son divertidos, pues tienen que ponerse ellos, ponen serio y valoran las relaciones con sus estudiantes. Bueno, desde que vino los cambios positivos fue que a veces ponen el recess primero y también cambiaron el horario. Y bueno, para mí el horario que me toca ahora es mejor y los estudiantes ya no son como más violentos.
Since administration is involved with
in the middle school hallway. Kids have been going to class more and kids aren't in the office as much as they used to in the beginning of the year. The 8th graders have been paying more attention to class and like going to class more, not ditching, and how like kids know like the consequences that will happen. It's been kind of crazy, but one positive changes that I've realized is that it's kids in class have wanted to learn more and they haven't.
Vengo saliendo de una junta de reconocimiento de niños y me dio mucho gusto que padres del terceros a sexto hayan acudido. Me parece que la administración, la nueva administración y la oficina les hicieron un llamado personal y eso fue muy bonito porque nunca había visto yo tanto papá en las reuniones como esta vez y pues qué bueno que los niños se sientan como orgullosos de que sus papás también vengan por lo menos a recoger un certificado para ellos, que se nota la importancia que tenemos de los padres hacia los alumnos porque pues ellos también se sienten orgullosos y tratan de decir, oh, mi papá vino, mi mamá vino, o sea, es algo muy, muy bonito.
All right, so last but not least, as you can see, we are just getting started with things over at Gateway. Definitely feel that there's been a lot of progress, but you know, we have a long way to go and we're going to continue working together as a team to get there. Have a strong support staff, strong faculty, strong community, district governing board support that's going to help us get through this and stuff. A few of the future action steps that I'll just talk briefly about is with the restorative practice piece, we're meeting with a gal named Pam McNeil to talk about Teen Court. It's a neat program where the students actually kind of take some ownership in deciding what are some of the restorative practices that the students can put in place for some of the consequences. So we're going to probably start rolling that out after spring break, after our kiddos go through some training regarding that. The next piece is I'm going to start another task force, kind of similar to what I started at Kennedy a while back, is I want us to design a mission and vision, and actually that's part of being in school improvement. If we have not redesigned our mission and vision in the past 2 years, that's #1 goal. You have to design a mission and vision. So I'm going to be meeting with stakeholders, parents, students, members of the community, staff over the next probably 3 to 4 months leading up to summer to get a good idea of what they want us to accomplish. And then part of the grant money is actually going to be pulling some of those people together over the summer to redesign the mission and vision for Gateway, so that way we have a clear focus of where we're going to go. So thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Gutierrez, thank you. I think we got a good idea of what you and staff are doing, and I like the part about engaging others to define what that school is going to be about. I know that teaching in these schools it's hard, so I wanted to A, thank you for your leadership, B, acknowledge that you're addressing the problem head on and not pretending things are better than they are, so thank you. And finally, I don't think that change just happens like in that corner, like at this school. So my question for you is, what can the board do to help you succeed and help Gateway School succeed?
I think just being our advocates, being there for us, coming out and visiting with us and, digging down in the trenches and seeing what it's like, because it's a lot different when you just see it on paper when you're there in person and stuff. And I mean, for some of you that have been in the middle school hallways, I've taken a few of you over there, it's intense. A lot of the tools that I used to use in all my previous years are not working here at Gateway, so I'm having to kind of reestablish and work with different people. So just coming by and asking us, what help and support that we need, and again, just coming by and visiting with us and seeing what we can do, helping our teachers and helping our community. So.
Great, thank you.
I would just like to say, first of all, thanks for your honesty, because I'm currently in a school in turnaround, and it's the most difficult place I've ever worked in my whole entire life. And for the first 2 years, there was nothing being turned around at all. It was just going straight down. So this is our first year where we're actively trying to do these things, and it's a bunch of small tasks. I heard somebody say that you were doing schedule adjustments in the beginning, or mid-year, which is another major feat to accomplish. So I know how ugly and messy it's been where I work to try to do that same thing, and we still haven't been successful third week into the semester. So that's
a huge deal, and you should all really congratulate yourselves to that. I love the collaborative decision-making. And then I just had one question about teen court, and how exactly did you learn on that? How are you able to implement it so quickly, and how can I tell my principal and I?
So, quick little story. I knew it was a right fit because my contact, Tim Clary from Elevate Phoenix, was talking to me at the Kaboom grant, and he said, hey, I need you to talk to this gal. She's phenomenal, and she's going to help your school. No more than 24 hours later, one of our new 5th grade teachers that we hired said, Andy, I need you to talk with this gal. Her name's Pam. Both of them were Pam. So I said, oh my gosh, we got to call her up. So I called her up on a Tuesday. She met with us on Friday, right before break, and brought all the literature to us. And so right now we're just establishing, getting a sponsor to run it, which we have several that are somewhat interested. It's just trying to figure out the 21st century, because we don't want to overbombard teachers with some of their responsibilities after school, so finding a sponsor that we don't overwhelm them and get that going. So again, we can get that training going pretty quickly. So I do have a contact that I need to.
So your teen court will be an after-school club under the 21st Century Grant?
I don't know for sure exactly how we're going to run it. We might run in conjunction with our student council as well, because we have our 21st century, and we also need to make sure we're in compliance with our 21st century, because if we're not in compliance, we can lose some of that funding.
Right. Thank you so much for all of your hard work at Gateway.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez and the staff at Gateway. I just have, when Ms. Roach was answering the question from Mr. Zerg, it just struck me that she exemplified what we set down as some of our beliefs, like loving each child as your own. And that's how and I have to compliment you on that.
Thank you.
And if you want us to come out, Read Across America, Dr. Seuss Day is coming up in March this year, let us know.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, before we get to the next agenda item, which is a dual language immersion model development, I do have some requests to address the board. 4 of them. Danielle Chapman.
Good evening. I'm scared to death. And I talk to children 5 days a week, usually in Spanish. I'm so nervous. Please forgive me. I should be like, yo voy a hablar en español para presentar un poquito de ideas sobre el Biltmore Prep. I'm mortified. So sorry.
First of all,
thank you for letting me speak this evening. I am the very proud parent of 2 beautiful children that attend the Biltmore Prep Academy. I want to thank Dr. DeMar and all their teachers and all their friends for just welcoming my children. My daughter is the oldest at 11 and really fun right now, but anyway. But it's been a pleasure to watch her grow from kindergarten to a 5th grader. And also then my other rambunctious child, who is currently in the 1st grade. Thank you, Ms. Blakesley and Ms. Gandera. So I just want to keep my remarks brief, and I don't know why I'm nervous. I talk to people all day long. This doesn't make any sense. But I want to say that I kind of have a triple threat that I am. I am also a Spanish teacher in the Phoenix Union High School District. And I am also a very proud parent, as well as I'm an advocate for bilingual education. That is something that's been at the Biltmore Prep since we have been there, and has been there since I've been at Camelback High School for the last 20 years. So I would really like to encourage the Biltmore Prep to keep that going. With that being said, I want to see more opportunities for other languages that are offered. I don't want it limited to just Spanish. I know it's a funding issue, but we really need to broaden our horizons. We need to tap into Chinese. We need to tap into French. We need to tap into Navajo. We need to tap into other languages that are represented in the Phoenix Union High School districts and the surrounding high school districts that are around the area that kids attend. I know they'd always attend Camelback, but you should. But I would also like to see that, and I would like to see more of representation of the Biltmore Prep working with Camelback High School directly, so that we can reestablish our relationship, recreate it, and reach out on a regular basis, so we can have more students that are building that bridge between us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kathy Hanson.
Thank you. Good evening, Governing Board, Dr. Lewis, the rest of Crane leadership. My twin boys began in the dual language immersion program at Biltmore Prep in its very first year when they were in kindergarten. And this year, after completing 7 years and into the 8th year, we transferred them out of the program and into the traditional track. From my experiences, I actually have serious concerns about the effectiveness of the program, especially as it rolls up to the upper grades, to accomplish not only Spanish proficiency, but proficiency in all subjects. I can't be for sure, but I suspect that a lot of the struggles that my boys had in 4th and 5th grade math were due to the fact that they were learning increasingly difficult math and in a Spanish immersion environment. And what I do know for sure is that when they switched to the 6th grade and learned Spanish in social studies, or social studies in the Spanish immersion environment, they absolutely did not have the Spanish proficiency to be able to understand and read a 6th grade social studies textbook that was translated to Spanish. That became very clear as we started this year in 7th grade. I have many important questions for the district leaders and the board. How are you measuring the success of this program? What steps are you taking to mitigate the disadvantages that the current middle school students have endured as a leading edge class and having to endure the growing pains of the program and the growing pains of everyone involved? How is the district monitoring whether students in the dual language program are receiving appropriate education in all of the core subjects? It was told to me that it would not hurt their math scores. It would actually, they'd be more proficient and do better in ELA, and I just haven't seen the benefits that that's given. And then what is the district planning to do to make the dual language program an appealing, high-quality option for all K-8 students? We're seeing a high level of attrition in the upper grades, and it's not, the value is not there clearly for people to stay long-term. I'm looking forward to hearing about the program tonight and having these questions answered. And I also hope that this information will be shared with all current Biltmore Prep students and that transparent and honest communication will be present going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. If I mispronounce it, please forgive me. Sandra Kukla?
Thank you, first of all, for the entire board. I understand you guys are all work very hard and volunteering, and to the teachers as well. You guys, my hat's off to you. I'm not an educator. I'm solely here as a parent. My son is in 7th grade. He started in the FLY program and in kindergarten to 6th grade. And we have pulled him out of Biltmore Prep. He's at another school starting in 7th grade. And I honestly wish I would have done it sooner. But I'm here because I care about the school. I live in the neighborhood. We still have friends there. You know, Kathy, asked me to come, and it's important to me that the school succeeds. And it's important that the FLY program succeeds. I think it's very important. I'm excited that my son is actually starting his 4th language at this other school, so language is important as well to me. But I just felt that, and this is hard to say, and these are hard things to hear, but I just can't have, while BPA is trying to figure out and has been trying to figure out the program for such a long time. It can't be at the expense of our kids. I know we're all trying to grow and get better, but you know, this is my only child and his time in 7th grade. We can't try to figure it out with our kids.
Trish Warren.
Good evening. I've been in the district over 30 years now. I live 1 block from Biltmore Prep, Squaw Peak as I like to call it, because I have a 26-year-old daughter, 23-year-old son who graduated from Squaw Peak. And then I have twins in 8th grade. And they started in the FLY program when they were in 1st grade. And I as well pulled them out at the end of 6th grade for a lot of the same reasons that my previous people who have spoken have said. And one of the things I just want to bring up, this was a meeting that was held about 1.5 years ago, and it really helped me understand what the problem is at the middle school level. Basically, if you think about your own children, I'm sure all of you, I don't know you all very well, but I think you all may have children or are involved with children. And if you think about your own child was immersed in English from the time they were born until they got to kindergarten, right? 5 years, 6 years. Then they started kindergarten. Would you have given your kindergartner a 6th grade textbook in English and expected them to pass tests, understand, comprehend what they're learning in 6th grade? You would never hand that to a kindergartner. Yet, in the language immersion program, the way it's currently set up, we are handing 6th grade students who have been in language immersion. My children were in it from 1st grade to 6th grade, so 5 years. We're handing them a 6th grade curriculum book in a language that and I did the math on this, my husband and I are accountants, 11% of their week, 11% of their time, our total hours in the week, was spent in Spanish immersion. My husband and I don't speak Spanish, so we weren't able to reinforce it at home. So you're handing them, so in 6 years, they only had 11% of the language, okay? Your kindergartner had 100% of the English language, and you still wouldn't hand them an English 6th grade textbook, expect them to test well and pass and do well in it. You wouldn't do it. So why are we doing it to our 6th graders? My son in 6th grade did poorly in all subjects. And my daughter, I mean, we're talking this original class of 23 students that started in 1st grade. They were all honor roll all the way through, always were the top kids. Then they get into 6th grade and all of a sudden they became C and D students. Why? Why did that happen? And it happened across the board. It wasn't just 1 student or 5 students. It was all the students across the board. They used to be on principal's list and honor roll, and all of a sudden now they're C and D students. So something is wrong with what we're doing in the middle school. There's something not clicking correctly with these students. And I think we really need to look at that. It's a great program. I 100% support the school. Like I said, I live a block away. I want to see that school succeed and do well. But after 20 years in the district and being PTO president, and you know, some of you may or may not recognize me, I've been here a long time. I left Biltmore Prep and Creighton School District, and my older kids about chopped my head off. You can't leave. They have to graduate from the same grade school we graduated from. Well, they're not. And it's kind of sad to me that I had to do that. But like Sandy Kukla, I think, said, we cannot sacrifice our kids at the expense of Creighton School District trying to figure out what's going on at that school and what they're going to do to fix it. There's got to be a change at the middle school level to help those middle school students to be successful in all subjects. Okay, so my kids went from C and D students at in 6th grade to 7th grade, they were straight A students at the school they're at now. And this year, they're taking Spanish as an elective, which I think is a great alternative. Maybe when they get to the upper grades, we switch over to the Spanish instead of doing fly. Maybe we just work at Spanish electives, straight A's in Spanish. So I appreciate the 5 years they got there, but I honestly feel like we're doing a disservice. They are struggling a little bit in math. You know, we're not able to move them ahead, where my older kids were amazing in math all the way through. And my younger kids have struggled in math and struggling to do well. So, and it's hard for them because I think some of those basics, and some of their teachers are here in the audience and they're amazing teachers. I love all the teachers at Biltmore Prep. So I'm not trying to, you know, disrespect them. I just want you to know we need to do something different at that level. Thank you.
On dual language immersion model.
President Young, governing board members, Dr. Lewis, executive team, the Ed Service Department is looking forward to sharing with you the results of a study that we've been doing over the last couple of months in regards to the dual language immersion framework at Biltmore. And we're going to be sharing some celebrations as well as we're going to be sharing some areas in which we have identified for needing to continue to work on. And we have Dr. Dubin and Ms. Sarah Beth who are going to be doing the presentation. But before that, Dr. Dubin has some special guests that he'd like to introduce.
Good evening, Madam President, governing board members, executive cabinet. Yes, we do have some guests, and while they may not be wholly representative, they do represent a very special demographic, and it is the demographic that we knew we could get immediate parental consent to attend 7:30 p.m. or 8 o'clock p.m. governing board meetings. So Donna DeMar, Anna Humphrey, Madeline Dupin, and Avery Twist are going to have a little discussion about their experiences in dual language immersion learning.
Entonces, Dominic, Anna y Avery, ¿cuáles son algunas de ustedes favoritas partes de inmersión en inglés y en español? Mi favorita parte fue cuando fue a emoción porque nosotros entendimos que ellos están diciendo, esto es muy importante. Lo mismo que porque vamos hablando en inglés con los padres y español con compañeros en el vacío. Mi favorito momento en español es completar mi español maestras cuando yo estoy en la biblioteca en inglés, yo estoy hablando en inglés y el otro segundo y no saben, pero yo estoy hablando en español. Entonces, ¿cuáles son algunas partes más buenas de esta programa? Una de las partes más buenas es que ahora sabemos un lenguaje completamente diferente de inglés y cuando ir a un país como Cuba o México o España, puedo entender que ellos son
otra vez mismo que porque si estamos en España o algún país en Sudamérica como Venezuela, podemos hablar español a todos que están ahí y no estar como sí, yo tengo como la misma idea de los son grandes. No necesitas ser en México para saber español, no necesitas ser en España para saber español. Puedo hacer en
punto que pueden entender que las maestras en español están diciendo en como matemáticas. Entendí que está diciendo en español, entonces puedo entender también en inglés.
Thank you, boys and girls. So you heard, you do not have to go to another country to learn a foreign language. You can learn it at 34th Street in Campbell. And of course, it is with a great sense of pride that we acknowledge the work of these students. So I'm going to just let Jim. So we thought, as we began to prepare for this presentation, we realized very quickly that it was really something of an archaeological expedition. We had to go back and do a great deal of digging to sort through the data, to sort through the history and the program evolution, because what we all, I think, know is that this started at a very grassroots, a neighborhood, house-by-house, parent-by-parent conversation. And so for us as an Ed Services team, it was really an outstanding opportunity to go in and look systemically at the program and the questions have been asked. So I'm going to share our findings with you this evening and let you know that it is, new questions arise as we engage in this inquiry. So we know some of the history. The program began in its current form in 2010. There's been layers of investment that have been made over time, including the addition of instructional coaching positions, one which has a bilingual preferred qualification added to it. Spanish language proficiency testing was added a couple of school years ago. And currently, dual language has become a school-wide focus for the school. Enrollment now reaches 467 students, which is 78% of the overall school population. And that's significant. I've been in the district long enough to recall when Biltmore was on the verge of closing its doors because of low enrollment. In 2018, our first dual language immersion cohort will promote to high school.
Question.
Please.
So what was the reason for changing from FLI to dual language?
Well, that's one of those questions that I don't have a really good answer for you, other than it happened. And in going back through the research and the literature about the program and the model frameworks, dual language immersion is the term used in other program models and in the scholarly literature. So I don't know why, but I can tell you DLI is a more representative term for what we're doing in the program.
From a parent, a potential parent for BPA, who is very sensitive to semantics. The word foreign makes something seem different, odd, strange, whatever. So it's really just an awareness of the fact that the term foreign tends to exclude some people, or they get that perception. Because that was one of the first things he brought up when he toured the school, so I love everything about it. However, you guys might want to watch some of the language that you're using. So, I mean, that was my understanding of why there's been a movement from FLI to DLI.
Also to the actual dual language immersion is the research-based framework, and so it's moving back towards really examining the framework that encompasses the dual language program, which is part of the pieces that we are really right now, so.
We went back to original documents from when the program was framed. I feel a little bit like I'm talking about the Constitution and the founding of our nation, because we went to framing documents to find some of these pieces that we're sharing tonight. That we know that the program had 4 initial goals at its inception, and those goals were lifted almost entirely from one of the programs that our program was modeled after, which is in the Cave Creek Unified School District at Desert Willow. So these are the current existing goals as they were established and as they remain today. The program is built, as Dr. Peterson referenced, on a set of frameworks that do have a very significant research base. Dual language immersion is a well-studied, well-documented approach to language learning research going back 20 years plus. My own personal experience as a dual language teacher goes back 20 years. And I can tell you that the Center for Applied Linguistics is probably the best warehouse or storehouse of that scholarly research. It is a place where we can go to find all of the elements, all of the research-based elements to support the work that has happened. And I believe strongly in the work that's done at Cal. The program was also built upon standards from the American Council of Teaching Foreign Languages, the Utah Dual Language Model, as well as the model program from Cave Creek Unified School District. As I mentioned, we have a set of national language learning standards. They come from ACTFL, you hear those commonly referenced as the ACTFL standards, and there's a related language proficiency scale or language performance scale. The scale's on the screen before you, and what this shows is what you can reasonably expect as an outcome. So this speaks directly to the question about how do you measure language learning in a program like this. And this really was part of, I think, the important addition of the language proficiency testing that was added in 2015, because that assessment actually allows us to connect student performance with this scale. So we can know in a quantitative way how students are progressing with language learning. As it has been attested to multiple times this evening, the teachers are absolutely the backbone, the heart, the soul, the star of the program, and that has been true from the start to present day. Presently, the qualifications for our dual language immersion teachers are that they have at least the qualifications of all of our other highly qualified staff, as well as a bilingual or an English immersion or a Spanish endorsement, the ability to deliver a model lesson in Spanish, and the ability to write a parent communique in Spanish at an effective level. Currently, the staff of our current Spanish component staff, 100% of them are appropriately endorsed with at least one of those endorsements. 57% of them have a master's degree. One of our DLI teachers has a doctorate. The experience of that team ranges from 8 to 17 years. And if they came to us with prior experience outside the district, that range of experience in similar programs is 3 to 16 years. We do use a variety of measures of Spanish progress, variety of measures to assess the progress of the kids in their Spanish learning. I'd like to stand here and tell you that this is all done with great fidelity, and I can't do that. These are intended measures, and they've been implemented with some consistency, truthfully, but they haven't been administered with the kind of consistency that really is going to give us longitudinal data right now. But the foundation is there, and we have a good start. We have some excellent data that we're going to go through in a few moments. This is the stated assessment plan for the district. I went through, and I'm typically not a color coding kind of guy, but in order to make sense out of this plan, I really did need to do some coloring. And so each of the yellow bars represent the same assessment. There's a Form A and a Form B. Students in grades 3, 5, and 7 take an interpersonal listening and speaking assessment. Students in grades 4, 6, and 8, you see the green highlight, take a presentational writing assessment. And then grades 6 and 8, students take the interpretive reading assessment. So at first, our question was, why not every year? How are we going to compare growth year to year? And what we learned as part of our expedition through these data are that it does take a long time for the language progress to register on an assessment like this. And because we are mindful, as are the designers of the assessment, that we don't want to overburden students with testing on top of all the other assessments, it is sensible to administer, and indeed a best practice, to administer these assessments in a staggered way. So you can look grade to grade, but really the best measures that, based on our experience, are once a student has taken, for example, last year's 5th grader having taken the ILS, the Interpersonal Listening and Speaking Test, twice. And that's some of the data that will be shared with you. The program also includes the Spanish Can Do Progress Report. This is to be distributed to students on an annual basis. I even had to go through the parental archives to think about, to look for what of these I've received in the past. I can tell you that they come directly, I have received some of them, and they come directly from the National Language Learning Standards from ACTFL. These are more of a qualitative kind of measure based on the teacher's experience and the classroom experience of the child and the teacher together, and they align directly to the language progress scale that I shared earlier. So now we're going to dive into the data. I do have some graphic slides in the appendix, but we're going to talk through just what came out of those when we began the analysis. I have an expert with me. Mrs. Sarah Beth George is our district-wide language acquisition instructional coach. Her job is to build the capacity of our instructional coaching team and our teachers across the district, specifically around language acquisition. She primarily works with those teachers who are teaching English to our non-native speakers of English, but for the last 2 years, we've been partnering as a department with the team at Biltmore Prep to apply language methodologies to the systematic teaching of Spanish in the program. And so with more on that, and specifically the results from Apple, Ms. Sarah Beth. Ms. George.
Good evening. Thank you so much. This was a really interesting and informative experience for us to dig through the data from the Spanish assessments that our students began taking in 2015. So we uncovered a lot of really interesting information, and most of it was very, very positive. We were really excited to see a positive trend in language growth over time, and that's especially evident in our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade classroom or student cohorts. Grades 6 and 7 had very inconsistent sample sizes and less reliable results. The data that we were able to sort through was really messy, and that really speaks to what Dr. Dubin said earlier about the level of fidelity that we're excited to fix moving forward. We also found that 55% of all of the students who were tested last year in May of 2017 scored at or above the intermediate range, which we found very significant. Over half of our students are at the intermediate range. And when we look at the benchmarks, it definitely depends based on the test. We have your interpersonal listening and speaking and your writing and your reading assessments and the grade level, but all of the benchmark goals are within that intermediate range. So that was exciting.
I just want to clarify one thing. When we talk about benchmarks in this context, what that means is there's a particular range of scores on the Apple test that are considered benchmark or appropriate for the given language level. So what this says is that 55% of the kids are within that range according to this assessment. This is separate from the curriculum benchmarks that we typically talk about.
Yes, thank you for that. So right below that intermediate range is the novice range. And so of our students that were in the novice range, over half of them were high novice, which is only one level away from intermediate. So in total, we had 304 students who took one of these Apple tests in spring of 2017, and 78% of those students were at least at the high novice level in their Spanish language proficiency, which we found to be encouraging.
Do the levels correlate to a grade level?
They do not. So it's just a level of proficiency in the language ranging from low novice to low advanced.
Does it correlate to a reading level?
Not that we were able to find so far.
Is
So
it different tests for each grade?
there are Form A's and Form B's. Can you go back to that slide?
Or do the students take about, I guess I'm banging off her question. Do the first graders take the same, or third graders take the same test as sixth graders to get a novice or a high novice? It's the same.
There are different forms. So when you're looking at our listening and speaking test, there is, so third grade and fifth grade do take the Form A, but they do have a different benchmark goal, which is right here on this slide. So you can see the third grade goal is intermediate low, which is the I1 level. And then moving into fifth grade, they're expected to be in intermediate mid, which is anywhere from I2 to I4. And then once they move into 7th grade, if we're still talking about that interpersonal listening and speaking, they're expected to score in the intermediate mid-range, but on a different, more complex assessment, which is the Form B.
So it does sound like they're correlated to grades.
There's an aspect to that. It looks to us, and we've recently cultivated a relationship with the folks at International Language Testing. And they've helped us understand these data. We can go back to them and get more. It does look to us that they're sort of correlated to a grade range, so that you could say, well, for a 3rd grader, the benchmark level of performance in Spanish in this case, should be X, according to this. So it's not as precise, at least from what we can tell at this point, that there is a range of expected performance.
Just to be explicit here, this, it's not reading comprehension, this is interpersonal listening and speaking, this is conversational Spanish.
For the assessment that our 3rd, 5th, and 7th graders take, yes. And then our 4th and 6th graders and 8th graders take interpretive reading, which is reading comprehension, and presentational writing.
So across the range of years, we're trying to assess a wide swath of the literacy development. The primary emphasis is communication.
Why wouldn't you test all those in the same year?
Sorry. Because that's okay. Keep going, sir.
That's my next slide, it's gonna be ready.
The thinking is that there's a couple of things. One is it takes an amount of time for students to register growth or change on the assessment year to year. So if we take it too close from one administration to the other, you may not see much of or unexpected change. But by giving that additional year of time, that really has taken the progression of language learning, or has given an appropriate follows the research that we know around language learning that typically says for most students, for most anybody to acquire a second language, you're looking at somewhere between 5 and 7 years. So this reflects that progression of language learning. Plus, we've talked many times in this venue about how much testing is appropriate in a given year. So to give every child the full set of assessments every year would be punishing for the test taker and the staff.
I have a question, because I've heard this many, many times, and having been a fluent Spanish speaker for over 40 years, and pretty much teaching myself, I wonder why, when it comes to the middle school in mathematics and subjects like that, I mean, it is called, what's the name of the program? Dual language, so English is a language, Spanish is a language. So I'm wondering why, where are you using the English? If you're using, I understand you're using the Spanish, and a lot of the kids don't have Spanish at home. They're just getting it in school. So why one in middle school, the algebra, the math, the things that a lot of kids are struggling with, even in English, why those wouldn't be in English and not Spanish?
It is my understanding at this time that much of that subject matter is taught in English at the middle school level.
Oh, okay. Well, a lot of parents came forward saying it wasn't.
And so we have adapted the course structure this year to allow for a different kind of emphasis of English. And throughout the subject areas where the vocabulary does become more challenging, more academic, more specific.
Yeah, especially if the kids aren't, speaking Spanish 24/7, 24 hours, 7 days a week.
In middle school, the course is Spanish humanities. That's where the majority of the Spanish, and that's essentially a blend of language arts and social studies, with the rest of the coursework being done in English.
In my recollection, I believe, and I think Ms. Warren talked about this, but at 5th grade, the math, and it sounds like it might even be too late, but the math becomes too difficult to have it in Spanish. And I think that has hurt some kids from what I've heard. Kids who are not proficient where they need to be aren't getting the math. in 5th grade. So they do switch to social studies in 6th grade, but then we don't test reading. What time of year is the test given? Is it the end of 6th grade?
And you're speaking specifically of the Apple?
The Apple
assessment?
interpretive reading
It's
test.
given at the end of the year, May.
Okay, so, but they're already expected to read a 6th grade social studies book in Spanish by 6th grade. That's the, what I understand the curriculum is, that that's been given to them.
It is I would say that that is true. I would
So
absolutely.
if they're not proficient, they've lost a whole year.
I think that the challenge becomes one of ensuring that between the child, parents, the family, and the teacher, that there is sufficient scaffolding, just as we do for our students who are learning English as an older student in our district. That is why the work that Ms. George has done and continues to do at the site is so important, because what that work is about is explicitly teaching how to teach, how to bring students up to speed in the structure of Spanish, grammar and how words change, conjugation of verbs, complex Spanish vocabulary. Those are elements, and I sincerely believe that those are elements of improvement. I concur with the finding that that's an element to strengthen, and it is something that we are actively working to move on.
And that elective class is still being offered to middle school kids?
Which elective class?
The grammar class?
The grammar is professional development for teachers. So we're building the capacity of teachers
Okay.
to teach throughout the content areas.
Okay.
The grammar, the language that students need to understand the content. So the 6th grade text that you're speaking about should be presented in a scaffolded way with pre-teaching vocabulary and other things in order to make the content make sense to the children.
And is there still an elective being offered to middle school kids, the one that was added in 2015? Help them with grammar?
The K-5 is the focus for Spanish, and that is not offered at the middle school level.
I just wanted to say that when I was talking to the students in the program, 5th grader, I asked, one of my questions I asked, what do you like best? And her answer was, 1 year math, English, next year math, and Spanish. I know it's not for everyone, but I believe some kids do like that also, switching off and changing the courses.
One of the things that we noted in our analysis of the models, the Utah model and the Cave Creek model, is that there is a division of math, so that some of it is in English and some of it is in Spanish. There's like a support component for math in English in these models. So that's something that is a natural recommendation for program improvement as we look at what we're currently doing as compared to those frameworks.
Excuse me, just a minute. Let the record reflect that Ms. Sexton-Rose has left.
I also wanted to speak a little more about the expectation that students are reading a 6th grade history test in Spanish. One of the things that we acknowledge is that they are still language learners. And so given that it takes so many years to become proficient in a language, we don't ever put the textbook in front of them and say, go, read it by yourself. The benchmarks based on those national standards, the ACTFL standards that are assessed on the Apple assessment, only have benchmarks that they expect students to score in the high intermediate range. So we aren't expecting our students, given national standards, they're not expected to be 100% proficient. So when we are working with teachers, we are working on scaffolding that content and that language instruction, so they're getting both of those in the classroom. So looking specifically at the interpersonal listening and speaking test that grades 3, 5, and 7 take, we saw from 2015 to 2017 a 19% growth in third graders, and those were 2 separate third grade classes. And then we did see within the cohort, so the students, the only assessment that we were able to really find true cohort longitudinal data was from those students who took the interpersonal listening and speaking in 3rd and 5th grade. And 68% of those students maintained or increased their level of proficiency. And so, like we talked about before, they did take that Form A. They had different expectations of proficiency performance. So they were expected to move from intermediate low to intermediate mid between 3rd and 5th grade, and 68% of them maintained or increased their level of proficiency. As far as our data from grades 5 and 7, we had a really small sample size, so statistically we were not able to draw any conclusions. Looking at our interpretive reading assessment, we can look at our 4th graders, and from 2016 to 2017, they increased we had 16% of them, we had a 16% increase in our 4th graders who were scoring at or above the expected benchmark on the Apple assessment, and in writing, we had a 7% increase. And so, again, with the 6th grade, we had a smaller sample size, and you can see that information in the appendix. We had a lot of fun, actually, digging through this data to find out how our students are doing and how they were assessed and what the expectations were. Thank you for allowing me to share this.
And I have a couple other questions. So I don't see much on 7th and 8th grade.
We don't have any assessment data from 8th grade because this is our first year having 8th graders in the program. So we haven't had any 8th graders assessed. And as far as our 7th grade students, we do have information, should I move into the appendix? No, okay. We do have information on how they scored in 2017. The challenge with looking at progress is that we were not able to see that because of the very small sample sizes in prior years. So measuring growth was not possible.
Because we're not giving the test, or because there's 2?
Because in 2016, we didn't have enough students take the test. So we're comparing 2 students who took the test to 20 students who took the test in 2017.
Generalize it for the trends.
But it's still important information for the teachers to have.
Absolutely.
And I would say that we're looking at the data from at a programmatic level and trying to look at groups of kids and grade levels over time. These reports are highly student specific, which is part of why it took us such a process to create what we're sharing with you. What teachers and kids get, or families, is a very specific report about the assessment and how the child performed relative to that language learning scale. So there is a decent amount of information available from each assessment, and I am very academically curious about the results of the administration in May. And our first recommendation is to ensure that all the right kids at all the right grade levels get the right assessment this May, because I want to come back and round out these graphs with more data.
And I'm sure you know this past year, none of this really happened. I mean, teachers did not get, or parents did not get these test results until after the first quarter. And I don't know how often that happened. It doesn't seem like we had a system in place to really ensure that it's incredibly important. I think that teachers get the data so that they know where their kids are, and that just didn't happen this year. And I mean, I just wonder, how does that fall through the cracks? And parents have to bring up the fact that it didn't happen, and just so much time went by. It seems like wasted time.
I, with all honesty, can't speak to how it happened, but I can speak to new systems that are in place to ensure that it won't happen in the future. Again, this is our first opportunity to weigh in as an ed services team about the program and the structure. Dr. DeMar is excellent at building and maintaining systems, patient for support, for delivery of information to parents, kids, and teachers. And I have every confidence that as a team working together, we will be able to ensure the timeliness of reporting.
And then as far as the teachers on site, the Spanish-speaking teachers, do they have a TOA, or are you, Ms. George, are you their person to kind of, I guess, observe them as far as their Spanish skills and the grammar that they're learning about, or how does that happen?
So in my position, I work directly with the site TOAs. And so together, sometimes we do work with the teachers. My role is to build the capacity of our site TOAs. So Biltmore does have 2, and one of them is bilingual, and feel free to help me out here. And she works with all of the dual language immersion teachers, and she and I this year, as well as, so this year we've been working incredibly closely to work directly with all of the dual language immersion teachers. We completed before winter break, we completed 1 cycle of collegial coaching with half of the dual language staff based on using scholarly academic discussions in the math content area in Spanish. And so we planned a lesson together, we taught it, we came back, we talked about what worked and what didn't, and then we came back a week later and did it again with a different class to really perfect our practice and focus on building that language through the content. We've also together led many professional developments that teachers come to, and some of the teachers even that don't teach in Spanish have been coming to learn about language acquisition and different strategies they can use for students who are at different levels of proficiency, as well as we did a grammar training.
So the short answer is yes and yes. There's a site-based TOA, 2 of them, 1.5 actually. One is a classroom, half-time, half-classroom teacher. The other full-time is bilingual, works very closely with Sarah Beth, myself, and others in our department, Nora Castañeda, who's not here this evening, to provide ongoing support.
And is she the one that, I guess, would hold the, or maybe you guys will do it in the future, but the progress reports, the tests, basically?
She will provide oversight and work with the office staff.
I kind of have a question. When this program, at its inception, well, it was approximately 9 years ago when the parents came to the board. It was modeled after the Cave Creek. I don't know how long Cave Creek Unified District has had their dual language immersion program. But 13 years, okay. So we're at 8 years, they're at 13. Did they go, the parents that brought up problems that we have with ours, they're real concerns. I mean, they involve students, they involve the learning process. And did Cave Creek have these problems? Are we repeating what problems they had? Is it like growing pains where you're going through and you'll have these problems? Do you know? And if they did, what did they do to rectify these problems that we can do?
I'm going to defer to Dr. Lewis, who has a little bit of personal.
Yeah, at the stage that this district adopted it, Cave Creek was probably had about 5th graders as their pioneers, so to speak. And their pioneers hadn't reached that middle school burnout yet, and they have a separate junior high. So as they originally started, they started imitating the Fairfax County model in Virginia. And the trend there was that the kids ended at 6th grade. And that if they chose to go to a middle school, they went and had an elective. And they got the elective at the high school Spanish 3 level. But they had huge holes in their grammar, reading, and writing. They were so conversationally oriented and so oral proficiency oriented that they realized they couldn't really even give a high school credit 3. So that Cave Creek went through that same learning pain. And there hasn't been a perfect system sense to flesh it out. The very different approach, as I understand it, and Mary Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you're learning language conversationally, it's very different than the 50 minutes that's done in high school, that's done very much, conjugate your verbs, memorize your vocabulary. It's two very different approaches to learning a language. So there's a bridge missing somewhere in a conversational immersion model where it's more casual interaction with the content, which I think is also a piece to study. When you're studying content versus language for chatting, and then the high school kind of approach we've used for 50 years.
Dr. Dubin, when we go back to the original goals, the first goal was meet or exceed grade level academic achievement. Wasn't about Spanish. I don't know if they were ranked, but I know as a governing board that's something we talked about. And we were presented the science about how the brain works and language acquisition and how that engages our kids so that they can acquire the other subjects and disciplines quickly. So recognizing the shortcomings, the testimonies of our parents, I'm curious less about Spanish right now and what are we doing for middle school kids who might be deficient or might not be performing at the academic levels that they should be in the other disciplines, math, science, social studies, language arts.
What I would like to give you is a really long and detailed answer to that question. The problem is that was really outside the scope of this study. So I don't feel prepared to confidently answer that question with the kind of specificity that I know that this board would like to have. So I know that a big piece of it has to do with the professional learning support that almost soon to be Dr. Ramos, as the instructional coach, is providing directly to the teachers as to how to differentiate instruction for the students at that level. But it is a challenge, and I can come back with additional information in the future.
I also think, maybe I'm not speaking to the whole board, but given the challenges and where we're at, like what are we doing? What are our next steps? What are your recommendations?
So our recommendations, just very quickly, one of the things that's been added this year is Spanish language proficiency testing for our 8th graders with Phoenix Union. So that partnership for articulation support is starting to gel. So we have a plan in place to offer this assessment, which will allow students to go into high school with the ability to test out of Spanish and receive some credit potentially, depending on performance. So that's one action. We believe that, as I said, the assessment plan has to be implemented fully and properly. So if you're a 5th grader in the DLI program, you need to take the right test. We also, I believe very strongly that we need to undergo a more formal program evaluation process. I spoke about the Center for Applied Linguistics, a global research development organization. They have free, useful tools for program evaluation. And I have a very robust toolkit that's ready to go. It addresses the guiding principles of dual language instruction, and I believe we should move forward and conduct that in partnership with the site leadership team. It addresses everything from family engagement to curriculum assessment planning and communication. That's critical. It can provide guidance for years to come. Clarifying the program goals and outcomes. Those were the intended goals. I believe that there's a lot of work to do there. Work has been done to refine the scope and sequence of the curriculum and how the learning of Spanish progresses over the grade levels. That work needs to continue through a supported process at the district level. It's happened largely at the site level, and we can do more work there. We also need to relook at the model and the balance of Spanish and English, specifically as it relates to the mathematics support component, as well as the development of Spanish literacy, the reading and writing piece. And then it has always been a struggle, or an issue, I should say, increasing the ability of, or the availability of aligned Spanish language materials. We did invest in Spanish materials several years ago on the timeline. that is, I know, still very much in need. So those are our recommendations today.
Going back to the partnership with Phoenix Union, a couple things. What if our 8th graders don't test into anything? I mean, I feel like that's a possibility. Obviously, we know we've made some mistakes and we're gonna try and fix it moving forward.
Well, there's several elements to this. One is we're excited to offer it. We have not only the ability to offer the assessment, but we also have the curriculum documents that Phoenix Union uses to guide the development of its Spanish language courses. And so in looking at those curriculum documents and comparing them to our own and the progression of our language standards, we have a high degree of confidence that students have been prepared to do well on this assessment. That's just a long way of saying there's a lot of alignment between what we've done and what it takes to pass this assessment. I cannot guarantee an outcome. That's going to be highly individualized, child by child. But we now have the ability to offer. Another question will be, of our current 8th grade parents, who's going to wish to do this? Who wishes to enroll in Phoenix Union? That will, I think, ultimately drive how many take the assessment, which will affect our sample size and will affect our ability to then say, here's the percentage of kids who qualify in LO.
And the test that Phoenix Union requires kids to take, is it similar to other high schools? Because we do have a lot of open enrollment kids. I mean, Phoenix Union is not their feeder school.
It's Phoenix Union, it's a district-wide. It's a district-wide Spanish proficiency test.
But Arcadia, Brophy, I mean, our students, they don't live in the district.
Yes, correct. I would say that it is our understanding that this is a district-wide Spanish proficiency exam, which provides the opportunity for opting out or placing ahead in language courses and receiving credit for courses across Phoenix Union. So that would impact Phoenix Union high schools.
So if they were going to a different school, they'd have to they'd take that on their own.
Even if they were going to go outside
Like
of Phoenix
Arcadia,
Union.
yeah.
We do not have existing partnerships with Scottsdale Unified or Tempe Union. So right now, we're specifically focused on this work with Phoenix Union. It seems to me plausible that there would be similar opportunities. The systematic question we'll have to answer is, are we in a position to sustain offering this kind of testing for the many choice high schools that our students may wish to pursue? So that concludes our formal presentation. We are absolutely willing to entertain additional questions and or dialogue.
Carl's comment about the goals and pointing us back to the goals with regards to proficiency made me think about that we are having our BPA presentation next board meeting. And it would be nice, because now I'm concerned about those proficiency goals. Can we have that with the non-dual language and the dual language kids, just so we can see what the difference is there between those kids and their proficiency? Is it possible for us to sort out those types of demographics?
You're specifically speaking of Daisy Merritt?
You're getting a head nod from the two members.
Okay, yeah. Just, because like I said, if the promise was to these parents that they were, that their kids were going to be, that they were going to meet or exceed, I'd like to see specifically if those, the two different programs, how well they did in those, with their test scores, the things that they are tested on.
And also the proficiency levels of those kids. I mean, I sat in those meetings as a kindergarten mom, and these were promises made, and I think we failed in that at the moment for our 8th graders, 7th graders. I hope, for the younger classes that's not going to be the case, but I'm not sure how it happened. It sounds to me like it hasn't been under the umbrella of curriculum yet. We've obviously had leadership turnover. I know it is not one individual responsibility. I mean, it really comes back to the board, and I feel like I'm the only one that's been talking about this for a long time, and everybody thinks Biltmore's okay, it's doing fine, but clearly it's not, and this has been going on for a long time. So will this live in curriculum and be overseen, I guess, by the curriculum department going forward, and has it not been really?
All of them. At this point, what we're looking at is joining a partnership with the school more, is especially in regards to the assessment pieces and the professional development. And so how, and it's actually led to some other interesting questions too, because if we think of BPA as being our original signature school, and we are starting to have all 8 of our schools developing a grassroots signature school, it really has cause for pause as thinking of then how do we support them as well in those pieces. So I think that from our Ed Services standpoint, it definitely will be engaged with the assessment and involved in gathering the data and doing the longitudinal studies as we come, as well as working collaboratively with the school in regards to what kind of professional development are we seeing that needs to be done, what kind of support that needs to be taking place. And absolutely, we will come back and look at the impact content-wise. So I think that, yes, this has direct impact as far as our work with BP, but I think it also has implications for us as we move forward with our signature schools too. So that's just an interesting piece that came up.
And then, in the future, because this was something that came up in a discussion, but I didn't get it out quickly enough for all of you. But I would like to, in the future, I don't even know that we need to necessarily, well, I mean, if you could, it'd be great, but the difference between our Little Big Minds kids and their proficiency levels, and then our non-Little Big Minds kids, I don't know if that's something that you could break down for us, but it would be interesting to see when their little sponge brains are still little sponges, is there a difference between the proficiency levels between those kids who come out of LBM? So just something to think about for future, just so we can see those numbers as well.
And I'd also like to know regarding Little Big Minds, how many kids are coming to us for kindergarten from their pre-K class? I don't even know how big those pre-K classes are, but how many are coming to them, and what the situation is, I guess, with Little Big Minds. Are we still on a year lease with them, or what our current partnership is?
I'm going to deflect a little over here to Jay with enrollment studies, and we can do that next week. That's not you.
You bet. Jay is on that.
Literally just received an update from Polar County today where they're at for 18-19, so we can get some fresh data.
Yeah, and I'll just say, Dr. Lewis, that I know we have some decisions on bonds, construction, some concerns. I think some of the answers and data influence how we think about that. So I feel like everything is urgent all the time, but this feels urgent, and we look forward to getting more data in the BPA presentation in 2 weeks.
I just want to reiterate what Carl said too. I want to know how we're supporting these kids if they are struggling because of the Spanish proficiency. And obviously it's not just the Spanish kids, because we've had families move to the traditional class. I don't want them leaving behind and being punished because they're our guinea pigs,
Yeah, and it feels like there's a stark moment, like this middle school. So I'd love to hear your recommendations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, that brings us to business and plant, award of request for qualification, construction manager at risk, BPA.
Madam President, members of the board, I've got some folks here to introduce, but before I launch in, I know we're on our first item related to construction manager at risk, and we have two. The presentation that we have here, the information that we have to share with you, really aligns with both because the two processes were pretty heavily entwined in the sense that we had some, for efficiency's sake, a lot of the players on the panels that made selection processes, or that were part of the selection process, were the same between those two. And we're also trying to be kind to our, the folks who responded to our request, to not make them come in on two different days. So a lot of this is kind of together, and so this will serve for both this item and the upcoming item. We have with us tonight Mr. Jeff Thomason, who's our purchasing manager who facilitated this process, Mr. Jim McVeigh, who is our director of bond projects, who's our lead on our construction projects, and he'll be coming up in just a moment to talk to you about the actual process that we went through. And then in addition to that, we have a couple of the other panel members with us, Dr. Stephanie DeMar, and also from our partners, SPS Plus Architects. We also have Mr. Mark Davenport, who's hopefully still back there. Looks like yes, so that's definitely a good sign. But before I turn this over to our bond project director, I wanted to talk a little bit about pre-construction services and the CM at risk process, and why we're bringing this to you now, and some future things that are going to happen, just to make sure that we've got a complete understanding of the way that we've chosen to go about this process. So when you acquire a partner through the construction manager at risk process, it is possible to wait until you're done working with your architects and you have 90% blueprints, and then go through a process to select, just purely based on guaranteed maximum price, your construction management partner. The problem when you do that, and the reason why you might want to have that partner available for the pre-construction services, is if you get to that point in the process, that construction team with all their expertise on having built however many schools don't have the opportunity to weigh in to help you make good decisions along the way. They also are not at your community meetings hearing what it is that your community wants to see in this project. And from not only my prior experience, but others I've talked to, a project I was involved with at the tail end of the prior district I was at was served very, very well by having the construction team there during that pre-construction and hearing from the neighbors what their concerns were for that project, so that way they were dedicated into solving those problems. After pre-construction is complete, when we get to 90% plans, we will still need to come to terms on a guaranteed maximum price, and that will come back to the board for ratification. So right now, this item is really related to those pre-construction services, and if for some reason we cannot reach an agreement, we always have the ability to go to our second choice vendor if there's a problem on price. I've not seen it happen. I haven't been able to find anyone who's seen it happen, but we do have that option downstream. So I just wanted to make sure we were clear on what we were doing today and what those future goals would be coming forward. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jim McVeigh, our Bond Projects Director, to talk a little bit about our process.
Can I just make a couple comments?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So, first of all, it's really difficult to come up with questions when I don't have PowerPoints until right now. That's for all of this stuff, so just a comment. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what this was all about. And you answered a lot of my questions today, and I appreciate you speaking about it now. But I have a lot of questions for the panel on how the vendor was chosen. I had questions about, is it the lowest bid? Obviously, that's not how we're doing this. It would have been nice if the way we're doing this process was explained earlier on in the whole process. Because as a layperson, it just is very surprising to me, and a learning experience, that we haven't been given a presentation about what we're building or design or any of that. When you explained it now and earlier today, it makes a lot more sense. But it still seems like we're taking a leap of faith with choosing our construction company when we don't know what they're bidding on yet. So I just wanted to make those comments, and it may become more clear as we continue.
And one of the things that we don't have in here that if I can call upon Mr. Thomason to come up is he could give you a sense of what the ranking criteria were, and that may be helpful. So.
Yeah, that's one of my questions. Yeah.
So the first process in the RFQ is basically putting the solicitation out with a basic scope of work and the proposed budget. At that point, the firms submit their responses for qualification. Those qualifications are given to the evaluation committee members. Based on the scoring criteria within the RFQ, they score based on their responses. Once we have narrowed down the firms based on Arizona state procurement rules, you can do 3 to 5, minimum of 3 firms and a maximum of 5. At which point we enter into interviews. We gave each firm approximately 45 minutes, 30 minutes for presentation, 15 minutes for Q&A, which was also scored on criteria. At that point, basically, we have a pretty solid, we're pretty confident with those 3 firms that any one of those 3 firms can perform the work that we're asking.
Do they have similar scores? I mean, what do we know what the scores were?
Yeah, I'd be happy to provide them to you if you'd like to see them, absolutely. So basically, we take the scores, we rank them, and the average ranking puts those top firms in number 1 spot, number 2, and number 3. A lot of discussion was had amongst the committee members about who they'd like to work with, the reasons why, and then we come to this process, which is basically awarding the contract.
So it'd be nice to hear some of the reasons why. Just again, we're talking $22 million.
Sure.
I was one of the only board members to work on the bond. I feel like it is my responsibility just to kind of, why did we choose one vendor over another? It sounds like it's a pretty subjective process.
It's a very subjective process,
Yeah.
absolutely. I know just from sitting in on those interviews, there were clear, there were 3 firms and 2 were very clear on, collaboration with the community, references from previous school districts that they've, built and worked with. Those are just a few of the criteria. I don't know if Jake and I.
Yeah, I mean, and I can throw out some other things. Some of the things, even though they're still really qualitative, but I mean, they're pretty clear. So an example I'll give is one of our panel members identified one of the firms. One of the things that's important to us is that our firm, particularly for our Creighton community, be able to communicate with the community so that we can have good two-way dialogue. And so 2 of the firms actually talked about using door hangers as a methodology to create awareness. Both of them showed door hangers in English and Spanish. But one of the things that one of the panel members discovered is that one of the firm's Spanish was completely wrong. So, obviously for the panel, when they see that, it raises concerns, and during the follow-up questioning, they're asking questions about that firm's ability to be able to engage with the community. So there were really a lot of pieces like that, and a lot of it really came down to a firm being dedicated to provide the facilities, the partnership, the communication, being embedded within our community forums and those types of pieces that were pretty significant. And Mr. Thomason talked about, yes, the information to you. The information is all public record, and it's fully our expectation, as with when we did the architect bid, that all of the firms that did not receive the award will be coming in to review that material as well. And so that's part of why we keep a very clean process. It's the right thing to do, so we do it for that reason. But we also know all of that's going to be reviewed by everyone who was involved in the process.
So really, there's no way to go through the process and say, we're going to go with the lowest bidder.
No, and that's based on Arizona state procurement law. In this process, price is not the determining factor. you can't actually take into consideration price. It's solely on qualifications.
And I will tell you honestly, because I've been involved in the public sector for quite a number of years, in the 90s, it was price-based. I worked for the city of Scottsdale at that time. There were projects in the city of Scottsdale that were part of what changed public procurement law, because like portions of buildings were literally falling down because the criteria was based on who can come in at the lowest price point. And so that's why it shifted to a more qualitative process of determining who seems to be the appropriate partner and then entering into the negotiation to see if you can come to a
Mr. Manta, Amy, Ms. McSheffrey's questions on like the bidding process, were there like, even if they were qualitative, is there like a rubric you use, or what were the specific attributes? I think that even helps just kind of shed light on what that process looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a number of questions, and there was conversation amongst the panel members beforehand about what was being looked for in those questions to make sure that it's on point. So it's not like a traditional instructional rubric. It wasn't given, a 1 through 5, and here is all the items, but there was a question, and there were look-fors for those questions that people were basing their responses. As with any rubric, you get some differentiation between panel members based on their background and experience. So, and Mr. McVeigh will talk a little bit about who's on the panel, and it's really important to know that some of that's prescriptive by state law as well. I'd like to say we're really clever and we included a general contractor because I think it's a good practice, but regardless of whether we had a desire to do so, we're required by law to include a general contractor who's not bidding on the project.
Mr. Manuel, I'm not sure where this would go in the presentation, but to avoid the Hopi situation, I just wanted to ask this question. I assume that when we receive an invoice, one person gets the invoice, another person pays the invoice.
Absolutely, those processes, we have those processes internally. We have a lot of conversations about them. In addition to that, we have a bond projects director, so we have yet another layer of review. And if you recall back to the presentation on the bond projects director, that was a concern for us. That was one of the reasons that we went with that position. And even in the interviews for that position, several of the questions, it wasn't just about construction knowledge, it was about procurement knowledge and managing paperwork and working with our finance department. And we had people from our finance department on the panel for that very reason, to make sure that's clean. I can actually share more about those being some of the pieces we looked at when we interviewed. Some of the things that were attractive to us in our recommendation today was the complete transparency for all of the construction, quotation, billing, subcontractors, all of that it not only be transparent to us, that we can see the back end, that it's not just that they tell us this is what we need, but the recommendation we're making today, one of the things that was impressive about that particular vendor was that they have digital tools where we literally can go online and look at all of those numbers and see all that information. So, sorry, you got the world's longest meeting, but you wanted to jump into
Members of the board. So the construction manager at risk, we did a panel selection process. The panel selection included the principals of each site. Dr. DeMar was here tonight, Mr. Carvajal. We had a general contractor on the list, a community member who was also a former board member, myself. We also had Mr. Davenport, who was part of the architectural team. And we were overseen by Mr. Thompson through the process. So for Biltmore, we had 11 different submittals for that project. We had 4 proposals for Creighton. We narrowed both of them down to 3 contractors for each project, based on their proposals that they submitted. The 3 finalists interviewed for both projects. Same 3 vendors came to the top in both of the projects. They did do separate interviews for each project, and based upon that, the team had selected to recommend Chase Building Team for the approval of projects.
If I could add one more thing too, because the concept of HOPE was brought up. There's also been a lot of news articles recently about why do you see the same people coming up as vendors. One of the things that was interesting in our process, when you look at the smaller project at Biltmore, you notice there was more submissions, and there were fewer submissions for the larger project because only the larger vendors can take that on. One of the reasons the 3 finalists rose to the top is because you see significant differences in the levels of service you receive and their capability to fulfill on your project because they are the larger vendors. They just bring more to the table. And so it's very interesting when I see these things in the news because people assume all sorts of other reasons for it, but the reality from watching this process is there's more there for the district, and why wouldn't the district get the most value for its dollar?
And can you explain just exactly what it is that we're voting on right now, the risk part of it, and what that amount of money is we're paying to balance the risk?
So the, following the selection of the vendor, we enter into negotiations for the pre-construction process for a price for that. That is based on a percentage of overall project, and the traditional percentages for overall project range anywhere from 0.5% to a full 1%. And the norm is 0.5% would be a project, like let's say we had Virgin Desert that we were going to go ahead and scrape off and drop a building on. That would be 0.5%, because in pre-construction we're not looking for old septic tanks, sewer lines, archaeological ruins, whatever. When you're on an occupied campus, it makes it extremely complex. When you're on a campus that's been in operation for a number of years, when we look at a campus like Creighton that's been in operation since the 1800s, those things add massive layers of complication and additional work. So normally those types of projects would come out at the top end at 1%. In the negotiation process where we landed, what's being recommended is a 0.75%. So my math brain is really tired at this point in the evening, but it's 0.75% of the total project amount, which gets about $22 million.
Yes.
When you look at both projects together. And so with that, the administration would like to recommend approval of Chase Building Team for this first final
I move the governing board approve award of request for qualification RFQ number 18043, construction manager at risk, CM at risk, for Biltmore Preparatory Academy.
I second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
Madam President, members of the board, at the risk of being redundant, this is an almost identical item for the Creighton School rebuild. Obviously, all the same things that Mr. McVeigh and Mr. Thomason have shared with you pertain, and the administration would like to recommend the selection of Chase Building Team for the pre-construction services for the, in regards to the RFP for the Creighton project as well.
I move the governing board approve award for request for qualification number 18042, construction manager at risk for Creighton Elementary School.
I second. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Oh, yeah. If the board would like, we do have some members of the Chase Building Team here this evening, and they'd like to share a little bit about some of the things that they bring to the table for the project. And I know it's kind of on the back end, but you'll see some of the things that excited the selection panel about this recommendation. And with that, I would like to introduce Mr. Barry Chase from Chase Building Team.
Madam President, members of the governing board, Dr. Lewis and district leadership, it's a pleasure to be here today on behalf of Chase Building Team. I'm the president of Chase Building Team, and we're really thrilled about the opportunity to share with you what we're going to be able to do, really helping to make super positive impacts on both of these campuses over the next course of the year. So the process just in defense, not just because they selected us, the district did an excellent job of the procurement, followed rules, cut off any communication, really handled it well. I've been building schools for a long time. So 1990s when I started building schools, my second project was William T. Mackin renovation and expansion that we did on that project. So I was quite a bit younger back then. But since that time though, when you talk about experience as a company, I've been building a school every year consecutively since then. At any given time during the course of my career building schools. So it's just deep in our fabric as an organization, particularly the projects we love doing because we like making a difference in the communities that we serve. So it's really an honor for us to be here. So I'll put together just a little bit of a highlight. It won't go long because you guys have covered a lot of material. But as you can see, we've got over 350 educational projects. And these are all different types of projects. New schools, renovations, additions, summer wonders where we go in, we have 60 days to remodel an administration area and do things to a school in not enough time, but we do it anyway because that's our expertise, that's our niche. 90% of our work is occupied campuses. One of the other reasons why the low dollar bid went away was because there were not qualified subcontractors in companies delivering work on an occupied school campus. So part of the CMRISC process is we do background protection or background detection on subcontractors, make sure everyone's certified. We do extensive safety inspections with our subcontractors to make sure they're delivering service at a very, very high level. As you can see in the couple images on the right side there, those are two projects not far from here, Madison Meadows and Madison Park. The orange indicates the construction that happened. Buildings that aren't colored are buildings that were existing where we had to build in these super confined spaces. So the items on the left there, the logistics plan, creating a plan and working on concepts on how we're going to deliver on an occupied campus with staff and students. Separating the students so there's clear separation so the kids actually can still have their school session and not be negatively impacted at all by the construction. Scheduled deliveries around school schedules. Understanding campus calendar and operations, make sure the school calendar is first, the construction calendar is second, our schedule is second to the schools. And neighborhood outreach, as Jay mentioned, the door hangers, we really just make sure the community is an important part of every project, and we just make sure we're going to be a willing member of that community and be very sensitive with dust control and noise abatement and things like that, so we can actually be something that the community is going to be excited to have while we do it. The long story short of what we do and how we do it is you can make this process fun for kids. So parents might say, oh no, they're doing construction while my kids are going to school there. Our goal is to make those kids go, how cool is that? We were going to school there while they were building. So we'll talk in just a second about how we do that. So Jay talked a little about technology. So the pre-construction services that you just approved, thank you, by the way, we're very grateful. You'll see here is a couple representations of the technology. So the upper left is drone technology. So when we're assessing Creighton, for example, on where should we be working to place a building, we go alongside of Mark from SPS, and we're from the construction standpoint. So he's looking at options, Jay's looking at options. We're right there at the table with budgets and schedules and giving ideas and constructive feedback. Oh, we don't want to put the building there because there's a sewer line right there, and we don't want to pay the money to move it. So we're engaged as your team member through that process. The upper right is building information modeling. So this is where you actually will work with Mark's model. We actually incorporate the construction bones of the building into the model as well. So you'll be able to see renderings and really get a chance to feel the space before it's built, which is really a huge advantage to the technology now. Lastly, the thermal cameras. So when we're assessing some of the existing buildings, whether it be built more at Creighton, being able to look at thermal envelopes, and that image will say if you see blue, it's good. If it's red, that means you're leaking. You've got some leaks coming through. So you basically use this technology to really help you assess that envelope and figure out what needs to happen on the campus. So just a little bit of highlight. So our goal through the pre-construction process, one is to make sure we're getting that cost as low as possible. And Jay mentioned it, it's a very transparent process. So we get all competitive subcontractor bids, we expose those bids, our cards are on the table, you see everything that's happening. So it's a very thorough and transparent process, and it's one we do all the time. So we've gotten really accustomed to how to get clients comfortable with where costs are, where we are on that budget and trying to meet it. But the lower we can get that cost done, and especially since you worked on the bond originally, that's a commitment to the community that the community made by supporting this bond. And it's all of our fiduciary responsibilities to make sure we get the very most possible for these schools for the very long term. So that's really paramount. That's where we come in. That's where the whole team comes in. Construction is fun. We really see that as an opportunity, looking to get STEM involvement in the academics on the campuses, so we can actually get the kids to be a part of it. We're not putting them in the job site digging trenches, but we do classroom activity where we can do things that are actually engaging the kids in the process, so they're actually seeing what's happening on the job site and seeing some instructional things. It's just really, really fun, and the kids just absolutely love it. The engaged students in the marketing, we talked about different things like working to support a website for the community and figuring out how it's going to work. Might be a different type of website at one school versus the other school, but something that's going to be really effective to communicate the drop-offs. If there's change in where the parking is for students or the drop-offs, but having a vibrant live website to be able to keep the community informed, we think that's going to be really important. And lastly, our commitment basically is to make sure that these projects are really delivered with the specialness in mind. As I was learning more about this district, and I go online, I see the branding, and I see the back to school video, which I'm not playing this time. The back to school video, it's fun. There's a spirit here, and it's really, really cool. So our commitment is to make sure we're going to sit alongside Creighton School District. I won't sit up there with you, but we'll sit alongside of you to make sure this project is going to be everything that you want it to be. That these kids look back at it and say, that was the coolest thing ever. So we're very grateful for the opportunity. Happy to answer any questions if you had them, because there's a lot of new terminology and a lot of new things going on, but we're really grateful for the opportunity to be here.
Any questions?
I have a question. So as a board member, there's one thing that I would like to get my wish as far as, especially Creighton. And I don't know when is the appropriate time to do that as a board member.
Go for it.
I just want, and I think this was an issue at Hopi too, I would like to see a lot of trees, especially at Creighton. McDowell is so just not attractive at the moment, and it would be great to have shady trees along that sidewalk, and then also wherever the kids are gonna be outside, you know.
I think there's a lot of lessons learned on what you've been reading on that project in Hopi. And I think the difference here is, though, you've got a really excellent architect, and he understands how to engage the key stakeholders in a project. So we might not be designing where to put the trees. We'll put them in the ground. He's the one who usually designs them and says, I want this specimen and this size, and here's where they're going to be spotted and why. But we've already talked about the importance of having a community engagement plan, stakeholder levels, and making sure you get some opportunity to really see what the project's coming in and what it's looking like. And then as you get a chance further down the road to approve the final budget, then you'll be bought into that all along, so it won't be a surprise. You'll be really a part of that process. So Mark's especially good at that with SPF.
And we've been going slow on purpose for voices.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and all of the initial concepts we've seen have park and garden and outdoor space. One of the things that created a passion for me about the Creighton project is no more asphalt between buildings.
That's great. Originally, if you look at the canal, which is behind Creighton, it wasn't cemented. It was like a small river going through with tall grass and shady trees, and it was a picnic area for families, I mean the canal generally, and swimming, things like that. If you could, I know the architect is looking at designing some of the original aspects of the new building with some original aspects, and a green belt would be nice. Thank you very much, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, next subject, transportation audit findings.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Lewis, members of the executive team, you've already met Mr. Scott Wells, our Director of Transportation and Maintenance. It wasn't that long ago, but no moss grows on Mr. Wells, so He's with us already to give us some preliminary findings from some audit work he's done, and I'm going to help him get transition.
Madam President, Dr. Lewis, members of the board, executive committee, thank you for having me here tonight. It has been a long 5 weeks. I started with an audit of our transportation department to see where we're at in alignment with not only the state, but funding. So, thank you very much. So a couple things I originally looked at: compliance, our classroom spending reports, the audits that were out there, the Creighton School rebuild. You'll see where that comes into play here, as well as transportation, and then of course our driver shortages that we're having. At the end of this, we'll look at reviewing some of those options that are out there. The first thing that came up was our special education department. It is 30 minutes off in the morning and afternoons. It should be in full alignment with our reg ed students, which means that they should be on the same start time, they should be on the same end time. They are not. We're 30 minutes out, morning and afternoon. McKinney-Vento timelines, I was a little surprised with this. We do have a lot of McKinney-Ventos within the district. Some of them are taking 8+ weeks to get them transportation. We are subbing with bus passes right now, but that is excessive.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Wells, but just for anyone who's not familiar with the term McKinney-Vento, these are families who are considered homeless, yeah, and so there's federal rules and regulations that we have to follow in meeting their needs.
Foster children are also considered.
Yes.
When looking at transportation for multiple years, we've been in the red. We've been overspending with our classroom reports. I know that most of you have probably seen those, and there's many factors that go into that overspending. I think the long and short of it is we need to be more efficient with our routing. We're having a lot of issues there, and I think we can improve. I know we can improve in those areas. Creighton School District rebuild. Right now, if we had to transport the entire Creighton population as it is, we're looking at 9 additional drivers. 9 additional drivers up front doesn't sound like a lot. But today, we transported our gen ed with 16 drivers. Those drivers had to come back for students. We had students still waiting at Excellencia. Out of those 16, 2 of those were mechanics, and 3 of those were out of the transportation office. So we physically transported with 11 drivers. Those drivers, 15 of them had to come back and pick up special education students. So if you look at those numbers, and if we were on one timeline, we're looking at 31 drivers. We haven't been able to make our FTE of 24. You tack on the 9 with the Creighton rebuild, plus our contracts we've been doing with McKinney-Vento and other, we're looking at 46 drivers if we were to make changes today. A lot of challenges with recruitment, and it's not just Creighton, it's a statewide problem with driver shortages. Drivers typically move every 3 years. They're looking for benefits, they're looking for an increase in pay. Those drivers know after 9 years that they're quite competitive. They're making good salaries, so they do jump. Challenges with districts are the retentions. What are we doing to keep them? They're looking at benefits, they're looking at the 40 hours. We are we are competitive in the salary right now, especially our beginning ranges, but hanging on to them seems to be difficult. And there's a lot of districts offering other things out there. With the current model going into next year, the Creighton rebuild, the alignment of special ed, it is unlikely we will be able to manage that complete transportation. We can't meet our FTE of 24, we're not going to meet 46 on one start time.
So it wouldn't necessarily cut our transportation costs, but if we had staggered start times, we would need twice as many, we would.
Correct.
Is that a possibility to explore?
Absolutely. The simplest math, and it is the simplest math, if you have 2 start times, your drivers are cut in half. I wish I could say it was that simple and works that way, but it doesn't. You go to 3 start times, you're cutting into thirds, you're looking at 16 drivers. which becomes more palatable and more, it gives us room for growth in the future. But there's a lot of data behind the scenes that we still haven't got to and we're working on, and we'll talk about it in a minute.
Okay. But on this driver shortage in particular, I'm just curious, where does they go? Is it other districts? Because I feel like all districts are short on cash.
We're all short.
Charters don't necessarily offer that, so are they going to drive for the city, like drive like the
The
city buses?
majority of
Where
what
do
we
they
see
go?
leaving for city and other actually return because they don't offer the hours that the school districts do. They're on call the first 2 years. They could get called at 1 o'clock in the morning because of a shortage and they have to go in order to make their hours. They are jumping school to school. Right now, the influx, which is really odd, we noticed with Madison, half the drivers are out of Scottsdale and we just picked up 2 more. It's not always that monetary value coming in. We've worked very hard and we will get there here at Creighton as professional development. The drivers like the professional development. We talked about PBIS earlier. They need to be involved in that. We should be sending drivers to those so they learn about PBIS and we're on the same page as the school sites. I can't tell you what an impact that professional development had on Madison. And we're not there, not even close, but we're gonna get there. So I see that helping with our retention in the future.
Okay. You're talking about simple math, and I understand what you're saying, but if Creighton is going to be demolished and the students at Creighton will be bused to other schools, you just can't divide it by 2 because they're not in our bus system. Because most of, if not all, they don't have a bus at Creighton School dedicated for Creighton because they're all walkers.
Correct.
So you'd have to add, and I'm not going there.
So when we did Monte Vista Pathville, we actually divided the schools up by grade levels. We moved the specific grade levels to other schools. I'm not going to be proposing that for the Creighton move. I'm going to be proposing regions. So we can keep families together. So that region closest to Mackin, those kids would go to Mackin. Closest to Kennedy, go to Kennedy, and then same thing with Loma Linda. That way we're keeping families together. Sometimes when we do those grade divisions, we're losing the families because 8th grade's going this way and 1st grade's going the opposite up. Does that help?
Is it true that no buses go to Creighton? They all walk?
We have one regular ed bus that does it, and we have two special ed buses that go. Yeah, it's minimum right now. But honestly, we're really feeling good, and we're hoping that we're gonna pick up some walkers for Mackin as well as Kennedy. Loma Linda's still a stretch. Reviewing options. I did perform an audit myself with these findings. What I found out is there's a lot of old data that we need to go through. So I brought in Jeff Walker, we've contracted with him. Jeff Walker is the retired director of Litchfield School District Transportation. He worked with Lynx as their data collection individual working with routing. He presently helps routing in 80% of the school districts within the state of Wisconsin and 20 here in the state of Arizona. So he knows his business, he's done this several times, and I am just so happy to have him with us. He's already gathered up his boxes and left the other day, so he's working with special ed right now, looking at their department as well to see how that's going to fit into the realignment. I've started conversations with other districts. We have had several conversations about co-ops because there's opportunities out there for districts to share drivers. We may have a problem getting drivers in the morning where Phoenix L does not. Phoenix L has a problem late in the afternoon with sports runs. So maybe we can borrow drivers. So those are co-ops we're looking at right now. I'm also going to be hosting a class at the TA conference over the summer, and it's actually a roundtable talking strictly about retention and hiring within the district. So I'm hoping that we'll gain some more information and see what other partners we have out there that we can work with. But as you alluded to, the key component for all of us going into next year is going to be staggered start times. We can't afford not to at this point. Just from the audit, when you look at the special education, that's a huge piece, and we need to get it under control. Alone, McKinney Dental, new child should have to take 8 weeks to get transportation.
So I know you're new, and I don't even know when it happened, but we used to have staggered start times. When did that switch, and what was the justification?
It's my understanding that the staggered start times were associated with grade levels, so that would actually double the problem.
It wasn't.
It wasn't? So Susan, you were here at the time, can you?
You do call me wrong day, wrong way, so I can't just tell you exactly when the change was. We had, first, 20 years ago, we had same start times, but staggered end times based on grade level. Kindergarten, 4th grade, and then middle school. In about 2008, 8 or 9, we went to morning and afternoon staggered, the early start schools and the late start schools. And a common dismissal, we stopped with the kids hiding in the bushes. And that seemed to be a really good thing. And the early start schools had challenges. There were challenges with early start and late start and professional development. When we went to the same start and same end time, and I'm taking a leap out here, it was also with the instructional day increase time. Yeah, it was right around there. I see nodding heads.
I want to say it was like 2011 because I was still employed at the district and I was an observer for Meet and Confer at that time. It may have been the end of 2012, so going into 12-13.
I could do the timeline and write it in the board update, but I really want to double check mine.
Yeah, I mean, when we lengthened the length of the school day and had that common dismissal, we still had staggered for a couple of years. I think the common start time happened a couple of years later. But Jeannie, is that because of professional development?
It had to do with we needed common professional development time because of the West Ed trainings, because of the longer day.
Horace, do you have anything to add relative to your?
So I don't think we have staggered once we went extended the school day.
And there was also a shift to K-8 versus the middle school at somewhere in that line. But context is kind of like take the sailboat approach. As the winds change, we move the sail, and as the winds change, we need to move the sail.
Right.
We don't know what direction yet, but the wind is changing.
We're getting close.
Okay.
Any questions?
All right, so the main purpose was just to kind of loom the audit preliminary findings, present the problem, and we're not ready to present a solution because it's going to be more complex and multifaceted, I suspect.
Mr. Walker, I'm sure, is going to spend the next 3 weeks. Basically, what he does is reroute the entire district several times on different software. So we know what's going to be best for us. When we said simple and easy, cut the district down the middle, when right now we have 50 to an hour delivery times in the afternoon. Yeah, you can kind of see writing on the wall. If we have a release at 2:30, we can't get to the next site till 3:10. Because some of these are taking an hour to get kids to get home. So he's going to run several models, and I'm sure at that point, once we've got those models, we'll put a committee together to start reviewing that data, so we can get you the most accurate information possible.
And I know this board will care about community input because it will inevitably affect somebody too early or too late. It's a cycle. In the years I've had of these conversations, it's fundamentally a no-win.
Absolutely. What I had told J-Man was we're definitely gonna have to start meeting with schools and community as soon as we figure out which way the tides are going.
Good work in a short amount of time.
Okay, the next agenda item, approval of resolution between Creighton School District and the Creighton Community Foundation.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Lewis, members of the executive team, the resolution that you have before you is related to an opportunity that occurred, and the superintendent's goals related to community health and wellness. There was an opportunity around creating a community center through a grant opportunity, and I believe some members of the Creighton Community Foundation are here to tell us a little bit about what that grant opportunity is and why we were looking to partner with them on that. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Jeff Bowles, and he'll introduce his co-presenter.
Madam President, Governing Board, good evening. I have to tell you, it's been a long night, but I've never seen a better testament to the community nature of a school than I have tonight. So, many community things going on around us. And I brought a guest here to talk tonight. Well, first I want to clarify, this is not a contest tonight. I don't have to go longer than the prior presenters, do I? Okay.
How can anybody?
We'll try to keep it short then. I brought a guest.
We want to make a motion.
I brought a guest with us today, just to introduce him. He's a new member on the team. And then I'll follow up and answer some questions, provide a little information on the grants that we have submitted. So.
Hello, my name is Martin Corona, and I'm a community worker with Creighton Community Foundation, working in partnership with Gateway School and Gateway surrounding community. Tonight we are bringing 2 lease agreements in pursuit of 2 grants from the City of Phoenix and City Development Block grants provided by federal HUD funding. One of these leases is a typical yearly lease meant to secure locations for after-school youth programs that will be partially funded by the City of Phoenix should we win an award. But the other of these leases is for 10 years, as long-term control of the site is a requirement of this particular grant, which is intended to create public facilities for the community's use. Our intent is to lease a building that will be vacated during the Creighton campus remodel and utilize these grant funds to turn this facility into a community service center with multiple tenants, providing services into our community. This is the reason that Mr. Bowles asked me to bring this lease forward, as ironically, I am a product of Loma Linda. And that means with my return to the district via the foundation, I'm in my 10th year of using Creighton facilities. So we are here to ask for your permission to use a facility for another 10 years. And with that, my boss, Mr. Bowles, will accept any other questions.
So I'm happy to provide more detail on those leases. One is these are city development block grants. And the longest term lease, the 10-year lease, is intended to take the administration building at the Creighton campus. If we are successful in freeing that up and remodel and repositioning and reoptimization of that campus, we'll take that facility and use those funds to transform the interior into a welcoming community center and a multi-tenant space for services to be provided to our families and individuals throughout the community and catchment area. The other grant is just an ongoing grant for various spaces on the Gateway and Excellencia campus as we do after service clubs, for which we've also submitted a proposal for CDBG, if you can get that acronym right, City Development Block Grant funding for youth services programs. So, any questions?
Where is the Creighton administration building?
It is closest to the warehouse and administration campus as you first come into the school proper
Where
campus.
graphics used to be?
It's actually the current front office for the Creighton.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
And you know, it's probably one of the newest and most functional buildings on the campus, so it has the capacity to be able to support interior remodel and still be put back into use. And this grant opportunity was an opportunity in partnership with the foundation to be able to bring services into the community. And the other piece of this that I really want to make sure we're clear on is we're not approving the actual lease tonight. What we'd actually be approving is the resolution to go through the lease process, because obviously the district's attorneys, any attorneys advising the foundation would be working on making sure that that lease is clean, appropriate. But this is just the board's authorization for us to enter into that lease negotiation. And it's required by the grant itself in order for them to submit for the grant.
I move the governing board approve resolution between Creighton School District and the Creighton Community Foundation as outlined in the resolution.
Second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And the next one is another approval of resolution between the Creighton School District and Creighton Community Foundation. I believe Will's hit this is with Gateway and the Community Ed.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Lewis, and members of the executive team, yes, this is the companion grant that was referenced in the excellent presentation. And it is for the two schools identified, Excellency and Gateway. It's rental space after school hours for extension programs for students in our community.
Motion?
I move the governing board approve a resolution between the Creighton School District and the Creighton Community Foundation as outlined in the resolution.
Second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Is there any legislative and political report?
Rock crunch.
There's a recess bill out there that looks like it might make some progress.
Do you have,
2 recesses, but not a ton.
is that why ASBA is opposed? Because that was confusing to me why ASBA was opposed to that. Does anybody know?
ASBA acknowledged being opposed to it because they thought that was local control, and they didn't want the state to start micromanaging hours within the day. In fact, they're encouraging them to go the other way, to include the 7th and 8th grade 1,000 hours. So there's some side conversations about modifying the 7th and 8th grade 1,000 hours to slip into it as a striker or some, I can't remember all the exact lingo about when that would be put in, but it was mostly to ensure local control.
Anything else? Future agenda items?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.